GM guys, we're back with another episode of Touchgrass Podcast. Today we have with us Max and Brick. We want to talk about DAOs have been a thing for many years, but very few have done things the right way and have kind of had real impact. And Arbitrum DAO is one of them. And today we wanted to chat about how they operate, what goes on behind the scenes, and how internally the discussions happen to make this real impact and how these programs are created. Welcome to the show, Max and Brick. How are you guys?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Doing pretty great. Hope Max is doing the same.
Yeah, Jam, yes, doing well, thank you. How are you guys?
Great. How would you guys kind of give a quick intro and then we can get started?
Yeah, Max, you go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Max. I'm one of the Arbitrum delegates at the Arbitrum DAO. I've been involved with the DAO since the beginning, so it's been almost 2.5 years. And recently, I also took another role at the DAO, which is the grant manager for one of the DAO grant programs. So this is a program that is basically the main objective is to support builders by mini grants and basically seed level kind of grants to new projects, new ideas, innovative stuff that can happen on Arbitrum and enhance the ecosystem.
Yeah, my name is Brick. I'm the Chief Motion Officer, as they call me at Entropy Advisors. Been with the company around a year now. Entropy basically is in an exclusive contract with the Arbitrum DAO. We started out as more of like proposals as a service type of business, just kind of facilitating different proposals that didn't historically really have any owners in the DAO. But our mandate has since kind of evolved further into the actual strengths we have. So we're currently slated to kind of push forward the DAO's treasury management, incentives, data, as well as then something we call special project capabilities. And that's basically like the domain we're pushing for over the next few years when our like exclusive contract is in place. For myself, I do most of the financial stuff for like the DAO or through Entropy for the DAO. My background is in investment banking, so that's kind of, I guess, my specialty sauce.
Awesome. KG, for your reference as well, like I've known Max for a very long time. Before it was ever clear, like me and Max worked a lot on Connect together. Like Connect was a client at Scribe. And I remember this really funny week. Like, I don't know if you remember the LTIP week. We had like a client weekly, me and Max, and I was just telling Max, like, hey, every partner's replying, every partner's showing interest, they want to come on calls. Like this feels really weird. And then Max sort of explained to me, like, hey, I'm an Arbitrum delegate. They probably want to talk to me. And that's why these group chats are being put together. And that's when I realized, like what the Arbitrum DAO was and how Max would contribute. Max also recently gave a talk at ETH Milan on how the DAO has evolved, which really sort of was a foundation of how I want to talk about this episode as well. Like, we want to talk about how DAOs work, but we also want to talk about how the Arbitrum DAO has evolved. Max, start us off. Like you said, you were part of the DAO since the start. Talk to us about, when the DAO was formed, who are some key members, how many members are there? Like, what's the main purpose of the Arbitrum DAO? And like, tell us about the backstory there.
Okay, it's a very broad question. The DAO was basically formed on day one when the token was launched. I think I checked the date the other day. It was around end of March 2023. So it's been 2.5 years of intense experimentation and transformation. And what I really liked about the DAO from the beginning is that, contrary to other organizations that exist in the space, the DAO was really empowered to make decisions. Like, it was left, the token was dropped, and then all the token holders were left very autonomous to organize themselves and try to do things and try to push the ecosystem forward. And as a result, as you can imagine, when these kind of things happen, the first stage of the DAO was extremely chaotic, extremely like dispersive in terms of efforts, in terms of like direction. It really took us 2.5 years to come up with a flexible but organized structure. And I think now things are going to change for the time being. So it's been an exciting journey so far. In the very beginning, it was really about the token holders, like the constitutions kind of set up in Arbitrum Foundation. But up until recently, they really had they were really like stepping back from making any active decision, active involvement, both for regulatory reason, both for their particular strategy, and so it's been one of the ecosystems that was really empowered with a big treasury, right? The Arbitrum DAO has a huge treasury, both in Arbitrum native tokens and the ETH or stable coins, but really left in the power of the token holders, right? There's like the centralized entities that the labs, so Offchain Labs, the Arbitrum Foundation, they were really like taking a step back and see how the decentralization movement was working. And so this created a lot of opportunities, challenges, and like as I was saying, it took us through a whole journey to understand what should be more decentralized, what instead should have more structure, so we can have more efficiency and effectiveness. And it was up until recently that we couldn't like actually set up a direction, which instead now I'm proud to say we have better. Like we are starting to see some glimpse of a strategy, and we managed to formalize what actually the Entropy Labs team called the MVP, the mission, vision, and purpose of the DAO, which I think is very exciting. And it was setting up those 35 sentences was a challenge by itself, but now we have a little bit of direction into that. And we can go into that, like into the details of what the mission is of the DAO.
I guess
For sure, but you wanna, yeah, Brick, tell us like, I think start us off with like how long have you been with the DAO, and then tell us about the MVP.
Yeah, I guess I've been with the DAO for now a year and a half, 18 months, yeah. I started out, basically my background in DAOs comes from Maker. I used to work at Blockworks Research before and was kind of covering stuff on Maker. And then I transitioned into the Arbitrum role at Blockworks. They have a pretty sizable delegation and have done a lot of stuff from the beginning, from the DAO, or when the DAO was actually like stood up. And I also worked on the ARDC, which is the Arbitrum Research and Development Committee, as basically the lead researcher on Blockworks side. So that's kind of how I got into the whole DAO thing. I guess before going to the MVP, I wanted to highlight a few things Max said earlier. First of all, I think why delegates are so important for the DAO is that unlike many other like DAO structures, delegates actually have like meaningful, tangible authority or power, where like you can't move anything out of the treasury without a like token vote, or like a snapshot, or actually an on-chain vote, which requires like a 3% quorum to be hit. Whereas a lot of other DAOs like just hold capital somewhere else, where, for example, the foundation can move around that capital. And also like no upgrades basically on, for example, Arbitrum 1 can be done without like passing it through the governance process first, which I think is pretty cool. And then also, I guess, just to quickly highlight, I think you asked about like kind of who the key members of the DAO are right now. Yep. I'd say in the beginning, like it was basically, as Max explained earlier, kind of chaotic, where it was just the kind of purely defined delegates who could be, I guess, widely bucketed into like native protocol teams, then service provider or these like professional DAO contributors, as well as then individual DAO contributors who are doing stuff kind of part-time, and then least but not last, university clubs. So that kind of formed the DAO in the beginning, but now recently. I think Max a bit alluded to this, but around like 6 months ago, the DAO was presented with like a new vision, which basically introduced something called Arbitrum aligned entities, or AAEs, which are basically exclusive partners with the DAO who work full time on like certain deliverables. So, for example, Entropy Advisors is one of those. Then we have the Arbitrum Foundation, OCL, the GCP, or nowadays called the AGV, which is basically the DAO's like gaming venture investment fund, as well as then, I wonder if I'm forgetting somebody here. No, yeah, the OpCo, which is basically a new entity that the DAO recently stood up, which is supposed to help the DAO basically on the operational front and have full-time people working for that entity. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. Sorry, I know you asked another question in the beginning, but I
Yeah,
don't
no
want to
worries.
babble too long here.
Like before we get on to the grand vision and some of the plans, how many people are there right now as delegates, like actively contributing? How many contributors would you say are there right now?
So I guess shameless plug here, but Entropy Advisors has quite a lot of data up on Dune. So if you want to look at the like actual on-chain numbers, feel free to check out our governance proposals dashboard on Dune. But like right now, there's around, I think, 240,000 delegates who have like gotten delegation, but that number is a bit misleading since there's around 3,000 delegates who actively vote on stuff. And then I'd say probably around like, I don't know, what would you say, Max? 100 to maybe 150 people who like contribute on the forum by being active and like joining calls and trying to like impact the DAO in a way. So like there's different levels to how you can basically contribute to the DAO. I think the biggest differentiator on that front is like, are you part-time or are you full-time? Like, I guess Max started out kind of as part-time, but now with his role as a like grants distributor, I'd say it's going more towards a full-time contributor. And from what I'm hearing, he's doing a really good job on that front. So it's great to see like more and more people basically taking on full-time roles or getting the possibility even to do that, because at least from my perspective, a large kind of friction DAOs have, or what they're struggling with, is that a lot of the contributors are kind of part-time or maybe use like 5 hours a week max on DAO stuff, which like, you know, if you compare that to how a company runs, like there's no way you can make any meaningful progress if it's just like a few hours here and there that people contribute in and out of the system.
Yeah, and I think if I can complement that, like, you know, in general, what we are seeing is that, you know, we need some form of consolidation for the contributors and the entities that gravitate around Arbitrum, right? We found out that we started with a lot of smaller committees that were doing like very specific jobs, even on a part-time role. And we found out that in order to gain the efficiency and effectiveness that is necessary for a multinational company, a multinational organization like Arbitrum to evolve, to move forward, we need to have this sort of consolidations that, you know, concentrate the task into these entities that Brick was mentioning, but also with maybe fewer delegates, right? So, you know, we might have a little bit less diverse kind of set of pool of opinions, but people that are fully involved with the DAO, right? They want to work full time. They, you know, they have the mindset set as I want Arbitrum to win, rather than Arbitrum is one of the ecosystems that I gravitate around. And so this is the trend that is happening right now, like consolidations and aggregation of roles and tasks and responsibilities towards these more kind of defined groups that are part of the Arbitrum ecosystem.
Yeah, I guess that kind of goes back to the like decentralization from the start point, where it was quite messy from the beginning, and like that led to incentives where like different initiative leaders aren't really, you know, naturally gravitating towards trying to make each initiative fit in with each other. It's more like you're on your own island and try to do as good of a job with the thing you're like pushing forward and the thing you believe in. But then where the connection kind of disappears is when you try to like put all of the pieces together, and you might even have initiatives that have like overlapping mandates or are working in like completely separate directions. So it's been great to see that like slowly but surely there is some more like kind of operational structure that's coming forward, which I think has been like a huge efficiency unlock basically for the DAO recently.
And then sort of, if you become a member of the Arbitrum DAO, like how closely does the DAO work with, like the other entities you mentioned, Brick, like Offchain Labs, for instance, or the foundation? How often do you guys collaborate or directly communicate with those guys?
So we have, I think it's once a month, there's this like basically kind of transparency call where all of the entities basically come together and share their success or what they've done in the past like 4 weeks, and try to basically be transparent with delegates around like what process is being made. When it comes to like actually working with delegates on a day-to-day basis, I think this comes back to the point I was making earlier, where like a lot of people aren't working with the DAO full time, and there's still a lot of delegates who are active within the Arbitrum space compared to like some of the other DAOs. So it becomes kind of impossible in that sense to be efficient while then like collaborating with most of the people who are in the DAO. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but like it's definitely not as every entity like collaborates on a daily basis with most of the delegate base. I think like the DAO has slowly went towards a direction where facilitators are given more power to like freely push forward initiatives, which I think is great to see, where like I feel like historically with some DAOs, some facilitators have been put under a lot of pressure from a lot of delegates where like, okay, why are you doing this like specific small detail? We need a vote on this. Like you can't kind of modify the mandate like that because like it's described like this in the on-chain vote, so please don't make any changes to the that's something like that's getting better all the time in Arbitrum, which is super great to see. And then I feel like there are still some like initiatives within the DAO that are basically like individual contributor or delegate led. For example, going back to the grants program that Max is a part of, which is basically like, I'd say pretty much fully run by individual contributors, but then on the back end, the foundation is helping out with certain like legal stuff or like some operational things, but still it's like mainly kind of, I don't know what to call it, decentralized driven or whatever term you want to use there.
Yeah, another thing, like I'm always curious about DAOs, and the sentiment on CT about DAOs is always on the negative side of things. It's because maybe most of the DAOs are not transparent enough, but whenever it comes to like Arbitrum DAO, it's like the most talked about programs and proposals activity. I see the kind of commentary on it. How do you guys like stand out when it comes to transparency? And I already have like Entropy Advisor's dashboards up, so this is pretty cool. But yeah, on transparency front, how do you guys make sure that people not only active in the forums but also on other platforms are aware of what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, since you mentioned our data dashboards, I think that's been one big unlock for like kind of I don't know if transparency is the right word, but for people to actually follow along how the ecosystem is doing, how the actual like Arbitrum One chain is doing, how, for example, our treasury management initiatives are doing. I think most of the initiatives are doing a pretty good job with their like transparency updates. There are, of course, always like developments that could be made, but I'd say most of the live initiatives right now have at least once a month they post like updates on the things they have been doing. And the one thing that could be an easy upgrade on that front is actually, I guess, like consolidating all of the reports into one place, such that for somebody who's new, it's easy to find like all of the stuff that's being written in one place, instead of you having to go to the forum and like scroll through several posts and trying to figure out, okay, what's this related to and like what's happening here.
That's
Yeah,
also where like the alpha is. I feel like sometimes that's also where like alpha is. People who dig into those forums, dig into the proposals. I feel like I've seen this with Maker over the last couple of months. People who understood what they actually were doing. I mean, it was not on Twitter. People were not talking about their burn mechanism or fees, but I think if that kind of translated to more platforms, I think more people would be, just from an educational standpoint, I guess.
Yeah, I guess the downside then is there that on Twitter I see a lot of stuff that's taken out of context or written by somebody who clearly like opened up a certain DAO's forum for the first time and just like takes out one post and, you know, writes about it on Twitter without having the context of like what's happening historically with that initiative or whatever. So like it can also lead to quite a lot of misinformation if you don't do your kind of DD. Or then you just like try to cause some havoc on Twitter, which I guess is pretty normal, and like take out things out of context and try to get some likes on your post.
Yeah, and forums in general are a source of alpha, right? Not only at Arbitrum, but in different protocols we've seen that the discussions about switching on the fee, for example, always starts on the forum, right? So hanging around those kind of environments can help a lot to get some alphas. I would love to see Arbitrum approaching more a kind of a building public mindset. I think it's important to to stick to the kind of ethos that we have in the space, right? This CryptoPunk ethos is about building open source, like doing stuff in the public and get commentary from everybody, elements of the Arbitrum ecosystem, but also outside. And so, for example, at the grant program that we run, everything is fully public, right? From your applications to the reasons why we approve, we reject, everything is super transparent. It's available to everybody. So you can go and see, hey, these guys were, coming up with this project, and they've been approved. So maybe I can also like start building around with them and get another grant, or they've been rejected for this reason. So we know that there is not a market opportunity over there. Let's focus on something else. I think for people that are willing to dive in a little bit into the different toolings and sources that exist, there's a lot of information that can be used to create value and make money ultimately.
Yeah, 100%. Another thing, I'm really like, I've seen you guys like this is on like allocating capital in the right way, in the right areas, in right verticals, and I think Arbitrum has done like a great job at that. I want to ask, like, how do you guys decide which narrative or category you want to kind of double down and put more resources towards? From what I've seen, gaming has been like a big focus for Arbitrum over the years, and I've seen so many creators get grants, so many projects kind of run these campaigns in collaboration with Arbitrum. So kind of how do you guys decide which set of protocols you want to support more? Is it just based on on-chain activity, or it's kind of a bigger vision and a long-term outlook you guys have?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot to unpack here. I think how the DAO basically allocates capital could right now be split up in a few different sections. So the DAO side grants, which Max can talk more about since he's the professional on that front. But then as well, the foundation offers some capital support here and there. And then the one that's like, or the two that are probably the most relevant from Entropy's like perspective is the incentive programs. We recently passed the DRIP program, which is basically an 80 million ARB program over 1 year, that focuses on like very specific actions or assets that we want to incentivize on the chain, which is of course one way we as Entropy through the DAO are trying to support new activity, as well as then like basically market sectors where Arbitrum's penetration isn't that high, but the underlying market size is quite huge, which we try to then push into more heavily. As well as then the last one would be how we basically utilize idle capital in the treasury, which would be through the treasury management program. I think a great example here would be the STEP programs that the DAO has been running, which is basically taking some ARB from the treasury, converting that into stable coins, and then allocated to like tokenized money market funds that we see, or the DAO saw, as something that could be very beneficial for the ecosystem. And we've definitely seen a big increase in the RWA sector on Arbitrum. So I guess that's a great example of how like activating capital from the treasury can spur some more activity. We've also done a few ETH allocations to kind of, well, first of all, create yield on the idle ETH we have, but also trying to support, again, like new protocols or existing like native Arbitrum protocols with allocation. So for example, Camelot was chosen as one of the protocols to receive some staked ETH from the Arbitrum DAO, basically. And that's all to say that, like, at least from my perspective, what the DAO is trying to do with all of these like capital allocations is a twofold mandate, where basically we're trying to grow the treasury in a risk adjusted way, which is safe and more of like an endowment style growth strategy, as well as then I guess the most important part is like spur up the ecosystem, like support builders and like incentivize new projects and existing projects to kind of succeed on the network. But yeah, there's quite a lot of different programs on different levels that try to achieve this. I think the next stage for the DAO would basically be to try to build up this like unified pipeline, which basically lets you go from an idea to a late stage protocol with the DAO supporting you throughout the whole way. So that would be like early, for example, bootstrapping capital for certain types of protocols. You could get a grant, which again goes to the like DAO grant program to like build up your project. Once you kind of graduate from those programs, you then go to this, for example, incentive bucket, where like basically the DAO tries to incentivize usage of your protocol. And then lastly, a larger allocation from the treasury to basically like set up real late stage support for these protocols.
Yeah, 100%. And also, like, Max, I'm curious to hear your opinion on how do you kind of go about these incentive programs? Especially, you have done, I think, a lot of the creator side of things as well. I've seen over the last like couple of weeks where people were surprised that a small creator got, I don't know, a 10K grant for creating AI content and stuff like that. What's like your thoughts on, especially your experience doing the gaming side of things, those kind of grants, and if you can share some of the successful examples on things that really, really worked out for you guys, that'd be good.
Yeah, I think on the, if we look at how the DAO is incentivizing directly builders, there are probably two main programs that exist today. One is the grant program, and the other one is the investment program instead for gaming specifically. So the investment arm, it's I think it's transformative because it's one of the first times where a DAO has the actual power to invest into projects, right? So acquiring equity in exchange for tokens, really align the ecosystems. And so we started with the gaming venture fund, but it's very likely that in the future will extend to other type of verticals. This kind of looks at projects that are already at the not a late stage, but kind of the grow up stage, so in the growth phase, when we can actually do meaningful investments, right? The investments around in the tens of millions into those projects. For early stage builders instead, they normally tend to flow through the DAO grant program. The DAO grant program has 5 categories. So we have new protocol and ideas, gaming, educations and events, and tooling for developers, and orbit or interoperability. So projects that fall in this try to basically divide the spectrum of every possible projects that want to work with Arbitrum into specific categories that are managed by a single grant manager. But the idea is that you really can, and you can get the different types of support that you need, right? Yes, we can give you a small grant size. The average grant size is around 25K. We go up until 50K for more promising projects, where we see teams building new type of primitives. We see some very exciting things happening on the Arbitrum ecosystem. But we try to also, as Brick was saying, like channel you through a funnel that can make you productive, that can make you win. So we make introductions to investors, we make introductions to liquidity providers, to other partners, other protocols that you can work with. And so the idea is that we can provide gradually provide a full spectrum of offering of service, so that you can succeed on Arbitrum. Like if you build on Arbitrum, you succeed. I think that should be the general message. Has it been successful as a program? It's a $1 million question, because I think it's a little bit early to prove, right? All these teams are in a very early stage. But we've seen some early, like this is the season 3 of the program, so it's already the 3rd year basically. No, sorry, 2.5 that's been running, and we've seen some projects moving definitely towards from shipping MVP and then moving to a growth stage, or like even some teams doing exits already into the open market. We've seen teams like really like becoming part of the backbones of some of the of the Arbitrum ecosystem in general. So I think it's early stage. I think we've started to experiment a little bit with these programs. Like you were mentioning creators, it's a very like sort of experimentation phase over there to see, okay, which creator can perform best, which program like has the best opportunity to bring in new people into Arbitrum, whether it's developers, whether it's ambassadors, whether it's advocates in general. So I think it's we are now trying to understand how this should evolve, and then what is the best return on investments. It's still early stage investments for projects, so we know that a majority of projects will not be successful. But if we manage to get the right bets into those high promising teams, and then we get them to really like feel affiliated with Arbitrum, right? Because we know how mercenary like some capital of some of the projects can be going through different ecosystems. I think that's a win for Arbitrum. So this is what we're working towards.
And then Max, what would you say is your main focus on the grant side right now?
Yeah, so I'm trying to I think the approach has changed from the previous season, that was more of a spray and pray kind of approach, like doing smaller grants to a lot of teams, towards okay, let's consolidate the bets. Like our budget is not unlimited, of course, so let's consolidate the bets into what we really think is really exciting. And then what I would love to see is like more projects getting combined with each other, right? Like these guys will not succeed if they have to work alone, if they have to build the whole stack alone. But if we help them, like if we put ourselves in the shoes of those builders, right, and in their vision, and we see how their vision can be complemented by other pieces that we already funded, that's when the ecosystem really scales, right? So recently we gave a grant to an interesting project, for example, that is able to really, the whole objective is to allow people to bring their data on chain, allow businesses to bring their data on chain, but with full privacy, so with zero knowledge proofs, basically. And the idea is that you can then lend to those business money in partnerships with municipalities or with like social active investors. based on the data that you receive from those businesses, right? So you want to look at the specific neighborhood, you want to expand into the neighborhood, like you want the businesses to grow. Well, let them bring some data from those businesses, how they're growing, right? What is the current balance sheet, this kind of stuff, by zero knowledge proof, so with privacy. And then at an aggregate level, a municipality can say, okay, I want to actually fund the expansion of this business because I see potential, right? And then, so how do we take those data and then maybe combine them with somebody who's working on the agricultural side, right? So that they can share that data, and we can then use, bring the data on a predictive, on a perpetual market, so they can speculate on, they can hedge basically the fact that there is bad weather, the agriculture is going to not produce a lot of crops, and so they can hedge the outcome all on chain, right? So this is the type of economies, this is the type of combinations that I would love to see happening on Arbitrum. And so, we as grant managers try to funnel this type of innovations, this type of projects with this vision to work together and to really bring something new on Arbitrum.
That's super interesting. I think just sort of teeing into that, like, I obviously have an outsider's perspective as an answer to this question. I think I want to open up to both of you guys and break this sort of tease into the MVP conversation we wanted to have earlier as well. What do you guys think have been like key moments in the DAO's history in terms of, this was really, really good, this was really, really bad, and this is how the Arbitrum DAO has evolved over the years?
Max, you want to go first? I'm kind of keen to hear your answer here.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So where do we start from? So I think we've seen a general pendulum swinging from pure chaos, pure like let's do everything, let's pour money, let's throw money at everything that people apply to, and then see what sticks, towards now a more like thoughtful and a structured approach. Okay, and so I can see the key moments that have basically turned the tide and swing the pendulum. One being the famous LTEPP. Yeah, we love acronyms at the DAO program that you, Rashid, were mentioning. This was basically a sort of incentive program that we launched for everybody who was applying, right? So you see like this massive wave of protocols applying for millions and millions. I think we gave out like almost 200 millions in total in a short amount of time for liquidity mining incentives applying to their protocols, with hundreds of protocols coming in, and then like these massive voting sessions where our delegates had to figure out, study what the protocol was doing, study how much incentive they were going to get, and then like they were being pinged by multiple people. Is what Rashid, you were mentioning before, right? This very chaotic phase where we ended up spending really hundreds of millions, but with very low tangible return in the long term. And so I think that was a kind of one of the wake up moments where we said, okay, hold on, guys, this is not sustainable as a system. Let's try to consolidate, let's try to be a little bit more thoughtful in how we spend money and how we measure the return, importantly, right? Because it's very easy to give out like hundreds of millions and then ultimately not getting much back for the ecosystem. So for me, that was one of the key moments. And then the other one, like I would say, is probably thanks to the Arbitrum advisory kind of involvement and stepping up as one of the leaders in the DAO, is when we started to work on this famous MVP, right? The mission, vision, and purpose of the DAO, because that kind of oblige everybody to sit down together and say, okay, potentially we can do 100 million things, but we need some direction, otherwise we're not going anywhere. So what is the first step? Let's agree on a general vision of what we want to do, what inspires us to work basically every day. And then from there, let's come down to some strategic objectives for 1 and 2 years to see how that translates into tangible steps. And by the way, we are still working on the second part, so it's not it's not that the work is done. It's not that we finally figured out how to work with 100 unknowns that want to work together online. But we're doing small steps, I think, in that direction. Rick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd definitely double down on the incentive programs. We run like 4 of them now before this drip program that's going to go live in the next few weeks. And I think that was definitely kind of learning point for the DAO, that everybody working on everything probably doesn't go too well. I guess just as an example, you'd have protocols send their kind of applications for these like incentive programs, and then you'd have like 50 different delegates commenting on the forum their own thoughts about like each application, and it was quite messy. So that's like, this applies to other programs that were ran like in the beginning of the DAO's life cycle as well, where like everyone kind of wanted to have an opinion, everyone contributed, and then you end up with this like hodgepodge of 100 different like approaches, and it kind of becomes, you know, unbearable at some point. But then I think the kind of big change that started to happening in the DAO, or that maybe kickstarted the change a bit, was the like gaming fund Max also talked about earlier, where like the DAO actually approved an entity that had a single goal, basically to own a vertical, which is like gaming, VC investments and grants. And I think that slowly started to change people's mind around like, okay, we actually need like specific and dedicated like contributors who are owning kind of certain areas. And then that thought process was brought even further, with a lot of key stakeholders contributing to this like AAE vision I talked about earlier, where you have like full-time contributors who are exclusive to the DAO, actually owning certain verticals and facilitating those. And then the last step that for me like is a key point for the DAO when it comes to like operationalizing itself is the passing of OpCo, which is basically an entity that's slated to like, I guess I already talked about this earlier, but basically help the DAO kind of connect between these AAEs and then the delegates, working as a bridge for them, as well as then like taking care of some, I guess, back office type of stuff, such as like maybe in the future custodying some funds or doing liquidations and stuff like that, as well as then like taking on certain verticals where there might be a gap that need an executor and doesn't currently have one. And this entity basically allows for it to either hire full-time people within the company or the entity, or then, for example, contracting someone from the DAO side to like facilitate certain points. So for me, like the key moments are around operationalizing or creating this more like operational structure that then makes it easier for the contributors to facilitate certain things, as well as then make each initiative more synergistic, because it's easier for information to flow between different contributors instead of like everyone basically working on everything and initiatives being kind of all over the place.
100%. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like we are coming up on time. We usually end. We ask all our guests this question, and maybe Max, you can talk about on the grant side of things, and Rick, you can talk about financial side of things, treasury management, and incentive alignment. What's your like number one advice for people working on grants for other ecosystems? What are they doing wrong? What can they improve on? And for Brick, what do you think people are can improve when it comes to treasury management and making sure that the resources they have, because a lot of these ecosystems they have massive treasuries and capital is not being efficiently used. So what's your number one advice for treasury managers and for max grant program managers?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. So a few like overarching thoughts on that. point is I see a lot of DAOs, like they have basically contracted a specific or specialized treasury management company or like a manager. But what I see often missing is like the financial piece of that point. So like you don't actually have any budgeting, or like the runway part might be taking care of the treasury manager, but like oftentimes it's kind of arbitrary that like, okay, no matter what the DAO's current spending is, we will move, let's say, 200 million native tokens to this treasury manager to basically manage however they want. Like there's no connecting piece between like the manager's strategy and the actual like what the DAO is currently doing or what the ecosystem is doing. Like it's easy always to say that, okay, the manager will deploy capital into the ecosystem, so like it will spur up the activity, but it's not actually like tied to any strategy, as well as then you're not looking at like what the DAO's current expenses are and basically just like chucking out tokens to this one manager. And I guess that's one piece that I see like being very common when a DAO actually has hired a treasury manager. I guess the other point that is kind of confusing to me, and I guess there's really no like right or wrong answer to this, but I'm still surprised that so many DAOs hold such a large portion of their like USD denominated treasury in the native token. Like, of course, you want to have exposure to your own asset and like the growth of your own ecosystem, but if, let's say, 98% of your treasury consists of your native token, like you're quite exposed to your own actions, you know what I mean? And then there is a moment where things could like spiral down, where suddenly your ecosystem isn't doing that well, and suddenly your treasury goes down like 80% just because you were so exposed to like your own native asset. So I guess like long-term thinking on that front is something that's quite often missing, and I feel like is quite easy to correct in that sense. And somewhat relatedly, the last point would be like when it comes to native tokens, I feel like there's been recently a big trend within crypto that like immediately when a project spins up and has some like even small amounts of revenue, people are yelling for buybacks or like some like value flow from, for example, the DAO straight to token holders, which to me doesn't make any sense, because like you want to invest in growth when you're a young company or like a young project or whatever. Like there's no reason for you to distribute out value now, because if you do your investment or capital allocations well, that means in 5 years you're going to return more than the cost of capital is for the actual token holders at this moment. And I think a lot of projects have gone like in the wrong direction in that vertical, where like they would have a lot of good opportunities to actually invest in, but then they just decide to like suddenly turn on buybacks just because like it's a narrative thing. When it comes to like treasuries and financials, I guess those are the three most important things that are on my mind.
Awesome. So it's be more diversification to your treasury, and don't be overexposed, and don't catch on to just narratives for the sake of it. 100%
Yeah,
agree.
and
And Mac,
yeah, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, and
yeah,
the
go
third
ahead.
one would be then the first thing I talked about, which would basically be like reasonable financial management and not doing decisions just because like it feels good, if that makes sense.
Awesome. That sounds wise. And Max, on your side, regarding what would be your number one advice on creating grants that actually make impact?
Good question. So I would say you know grants are really a bet on the teams that you fund, right? So there is a concept about the project and the idea they come with, but they also you want somebody who's fully committed for the long term onto that, and then they are they have the ability to be inspiring, but also grinding for on that for quite some time. And so it's not easy to find the right combination. And what you can do as a grant manager is as I was saying before, like not only providing that financial support, which is a key element, but really give them the most fertile ground for the project to grow, right? You want them to have access to early users to get feedback. You want them to get access to a distribution channel. If they need to go to some fintech organizations, if they have to go towards an institutional investors, if they want them to give them access to investors, you want them to be able to collaborate with other projects, right? This is all part of how do we make sure that Arbitrum or your ecosystem is the best platforms for people to come in. There is also an element of culture, right? How do we get to a stage where people are excited about new projects, they want to try new things, they're able to put capital into that. But this is about creating the right conditions for builders to thrive, because you might have the best idea, you might have the great executor, but you need this combination of parts. And so it's a very, I would say, challenging, but also very thriving and fantastic kind of environment to work in, because you see a lot of innovation, you see a lot of new things that are happening, and hopefully, we are also able to push the whole ecosystem right forward, and then raising the tide for everybody. Ideally, I hope that one of the next big apps and use cases will come out of the grant programs that we set up.
Awesome. I think that's a wrap from us. Thanks so much, guys. This was awesome for taking us behind the scenes on what actually happens in a DAO. I'm always curious to see. Maybe we'll apply for a grant as well, Rajat.
Please do.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, guys. It has been a pleasure. And yeah, peace.
Thanks for having us.
Guys, thank you for having us. Bye.